Happy Friday, Giants fans. It's going to be a crazy weekend this weekend, not just because of the playoffs, not just because of the interviews and head coaching search just going on, but also because there might be more firings, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I want to start with this. The Giants have more interviews planned, but we need to talk about John Harbaugh because the original report that I saw yesterday from the Giant Insider saying that Harbaugh was expected to interview yesterday on Thursday obviously was not the case. John Harbaugh is not doing any interviews until next week. So I guess he's taking his daughter back to college this weekend and, obviously is overwhelmed by all the love that he is getting from all these different teams. So that report turned out to be wrong, clearly. But next week, John Harbaugh is expected to interview with all of these teams. And now that the Dolphins fired Mike McDaniel and added Chad Alexander, who is the Chargers assistant GM, who works with John Harbaugh's brother, but also previously worked with John Harbaugh with the Ravens for over a decade, the Dolphins are definitely going to be in the mix for him. So it is going to be fascinating to see how this all comes to fruition. But I wanted to address that because I know that yesterday we talked about Harbaugh was supposed to come in Thursday. Not the case. He's doing all interviews next week. So we'll talk all about that next week. Don't you worry. But first, we did get word that Kevin Stefansky's interview with the Giants went well. He flew in from Cleveland on Tuesday. Him and Joe Schoen had dinner that night. And then he was in the building on Wednesday doing interviews. And one of the Giants writers, Paul Schwartz, he's a beat writer for the New York Post. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Paul Schwartz. Usually what he says is pretty accurate and has come directly from the organization. He wrote an article about a week ago talking all about Joe Schoen and how he's staying and blah, blah, blah before it was actually official. So anyway, he reported that Kevin Stefansky's interview went very well with the Giants and that he is a top candidate of theirs. I am not surprised. I think Stefansky is a great option for the Giants, but obviously I think Harbaugh is everyone's top choice, including the New York Giants. So we're going to continue to watch this, see how it goes, but I'm glad to hear that everything went well with Stefansky. He is going to be very well received, I think, throughout this interview process. And there are so many interviews and team openings right now that he's probably going to have his pick of the litter, obviously, along with John Harbaugh. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this goes, but stay tuned for more. Let's go through the Giants schedule that I know of. So far, this is my handy dandy guide that I've had to write down everything that I see because it's overwhelming. So here's what we know. They already interviewed Kafka. They already interviewed Stefansky. They are in the process of interviewing Antonio Pierce. I saw a report that said that he started the interview, or he did like one interview on Thursday and another one on Friday today. So we should hear that they completed that interview with him today. This weekend, their plan is to interview Raheem Morris, Vance Joseph, and Clint Kubiak. The Giants also supposedly want to interview Cliff Kingsbury, Chris Shula, and Jesse Minter, but I have not seen any scheduling yet about those three guys. I'm expecting it'll probably be at some point this weekend, maybe going into next week, but as soon as I get official things, we'll talk about them next week too. On top of that, the Giants have also requested to interview two other people. One of them is Broncos offensive coordinator Davis Webb, who has done a great job with that offense, including working with a young quarterback like Bo Nix. Davis Webb is loved in the Giants building. There were, in fact, even some coaches at the time when Davis Webb was a backup quarterback that said that he's got the mind for it and he's going to be an amazing coach someday. He's a great leader, etc. So I do think the Giants will be very interested in Davis Webb, but I think they are so focused on getting a head coach that has experience that I don't think that Davis Webb is going to end up being a finalist for them. Obviously, we'll see what happens, but that's just my speculation right now. Lastly, they've requested to interview Broncos assistant head coach and special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi. Darren Rizzi was with Joe Schoen in Miami with the Dolphins for 7 years from 2009 to 2016. Now, I know people are going to be like, I don't want anyone from the Dolphins and I don't want anyone that worked with Joe Schoen, and that's all fair. I don't blame you for any of that. But Dan Duggan, Giants beat writer for The Athletic, said that this is just an example of Joe Schoen casting a wide net And basically, he doesn't really believe that Darren Rizzi is actually going to be in the mix for the Giants. And, I think him having assistant head coaching experience like Mike Kafka had before they promoted him to the interim head coach is probably important. It's different than just being a coordinator. I'm sure you just have a lot more meetings and are more involved with the coordinators and whatnot. But I'm sure that they do like that about him versus some of the other just coordinators that he has that assistant head coach experience. So we'll see what ends up happening, but that's the lineup right now. Harbaugh is coming in at some point next week, and I expect that next week we're also going to hear about those other guys I mentioned, Chris Shula, Cliff Kingsbury, and Jesse Minter. So I don't know if there will be anyone else added to that mix. What I will say is this. I'm glad the Giants are casting a wide net. They absolutely should. They cannot come out here and think that they're going to get John Harbaugh because he supposedly likes Jackson Dart. You got to do your due diligence, and you need to have good interviews with people that you think can come in here and win football games. That's the bottom line, especially if John Harbaugh ends up going elsewhere, which is a possibility, probably has a pretty big possibility of him going elsewhere. So I'm glad they're doing their due diligence. The other thing is by the end of this weekend, the Giants will have completed their interviews for the Rooney Rule qualifications, which for those of you who don't know, it's 2 external minority candidates. So even though they interviewed Mike Kafka, who is considered under that minority rule, he's an internal candidate. So they have to do external candidates. So Antonio Pierce, Vance Joseph, and Raheem Morris will all fulfill that candidate or that rule. I don't think they're doing it just to check off a box. I think they are genuinely interested in these people. What Vance Joseph has done with the Broncos defense is unbelievable. Obviously, our defense is a cluster, so I'm sure he could do a lot with some of the guys that we have. Raheem Morris has experience being a head coach, and that defense was very good. He's a former defensive coordinator with when he was the head coach of the Falcons, the defense was very good. I think he should have gotten more time. I don't think 2 years is really fair, but it is what it is. And then Antonio Pierce, obviously, he's a former Giant. He's loved in the building. There's been talk for years for now that he should be the DC, that he should be the head coach, or et cetera. So I think they're genuinely interested in Antonio Pierce, and that's why they're interviewing him. I think Pierce would be a great DC. I am in the mindset that they need an experienced head coach for where this organization is at right now. And I would prefer that they go Stefansky or someone like that over someone like Antonio Pierce or Kubiak or Kingsbury, etc. So we'll see how things go. But I want to talk about this last because so there's been reports that even prior to the Dolphins firing, that John Harbaugh got 9 phone calls from different organizations that were looking for a new head coach. At the time, there were 7 openings, one of which was the Ravens. So obviously that's not included, right? Which means that there were 3 different teams that called Harbaugh and said, we're happy to kick our coach. We're happy to launch him if you want to come be our head coach. So here's my speculation based on what happens this weekend. I think the Packers could be an option because Matt LaFleur does not have a contract past 2026. I think LaFleur is a great coach. I would be thrilled if he ends up available. I think the Giants should call him immediately. But there were some Packers fans who were upset with the way that some things went this year, especially the play calling. I don't know if that's enough to get him fired. I obviously don't know what the people in the building think, but he could be an option. Next up is the Bills. I am most concerned with the Bills because if the Bills lose to the Jags on Sunday, I think they're going to fire McDermott. And if you're John Harbaugh, I think the Bills are a very attractive job. I'm not worried about that. If Harbaugh wants to go to the Bills, that's fine. What I'm worried about is that Joe Schoen is going to be on the phone with Joe Brady and Sean McDermott to be the next head coach. No, I don't want either of them. I don't want either of them anywhere near this goddamn organization. I am going to be so furious if that is what Joe Schoen does. So we need to root for the Bills. They have to win this weekend. We so desperately need them to win because the only thing worse than losing out on John Harbaugh would be hiring Sean McDermott or Joe Brady instead of him. Disaster. Now, I'm going to throw this one into the mix because I'm a little bit concerned, and I've heard mixed opinions about this. The Eagles. Now, I don't think they would fire Sirianni because he won them a Super Bowl. However, I don't think Sirianni's a good coach. My opinion doesn't matter in this. But last offseason, a year ago, allegedly, Nick Sirianni had to make a PowerPoint presentation to show ownership as to why he deserved to stay on. So if he was doing that a year ago, and then he brings in Kevin Patullo, and then they end up getting smoked by the Niners in the first round of the playoffs, even though they won the division, and Harbaugh's an option, they could fire Sirianni. They could have been one of those other phone calls. And I don't like that one bit. Absolutely not. So we don't have to root for the Eagles because that's diabolical. But I think for one weekend, we will not be upset if they win. How about that? I think that's a fair trade because I'm not rooting for the Eagles, but I am rooting for them to keep Sirianni. And I think for that to happen, they have to beat the Niners. I'm very concerned about that. So fingers crossed. Now we have to talk about the Steelers and the Texans because it's the last game of the weekend. But last weekend, it was all about, it's going to be Tomlin or Harbaugh. One of them's cooked. And then after that game, it was like, and then Monday rolls around and there's nothing. And then the Steelers end up winning. And you're like, they're not going to fire Harbaugh. There's no way. And then Tuesday starts to come and go. And you're like, okay, here we are. And then Tuesday late afternoon, boom, the news hits about Harbaugh. Texans have a really good defense. The Steelers haven't been to the playoffs in a while. What if the Texans whoop some ass on Monday Night Football after the Steelers just barely made the playoffs in the first place, just barely beat their division rival, the Ravens? What if they fire Tomlin? Give me Tomlin. I'd be happy with that. I think I would want Harbaugh first, but would be thrilled with Tomlin too. And LaFleur, thrilled. Any of them would be happy. But could there be potentially 3 more firings or 4 after this weekend? Could it be the Packers, the Bills, the Eagles, and the Steelers? I mean, Monday night or Tuesday morning, like that 48-hour period between Monday night into Tuesday could also be insane and take this coaching search. You think it's crazy now? It could fly off the handle like Alphaba. I mean, we could be talking some real crazy stuff next week. So it's going to be a wild weekend. Let me tell you something. So everyone enjoy your weekend. Enjoy these games. Root for things to go in our favor. Okay, that's all we want. We want good news for the Giants to happen next week. So fingers crossed, and I'll be back on Monday. We're probably going to have a lot more to discuss. So stay tuned and make sure you subscribe for more.